Hey guys, Chef Lo here again. Next video. Today we're going to learn Cheddar Ale. In order to do that, we'll need to get a few things out. Little disclaimer, I will be using beer in this recipe. You do not have to use beer. If your parents want to get you a can of beer, they can. Otherwise, wine or water will do fine in this recipe. But I just want to let you know beforehand. On the recipe I write out for you, it does have beer. I will also tell you water. So let's begin. Okay, so to begin, we're going to need to chop onions and peppers. Okay, we're going to start with one onion. And we're going to need half a yellow and half a green pepper. A lot of times I make this, I use the other half to make fajitas. So for your waste or your other half you don't use, it's okay. You will hopefully use it again on another recipe. So, cutting off the growing end. Okay, cutting it in half. Taking off this peel. Three-quarters. We want these smaller dice, so go small on these. Remember to use that claw grip. Don't forget to hone and sharpen your knife. Okay, so half a small onion should be more than enough onion. Okay, move on to the pepper. So different chefs tell you different things. Some don't use the top and bottom, some do. It's up to you. I try to use as much as I can. So I try to use everything up. Okay, so we're going to pull out the seeds and this white stuff. You need to use your knife, you can. Real gentle with this pepper. Okay, and then we're going to cut from the inside. It makes it a whole lot easier. Trying to cut through the skin sometimes can be a pain. So again, we want to cut these small. Again, if you're having trouble with your cutting board, put a wet towel underneath it. Okay, if you don't like using your knife like this, get a bench scraper. Okay. Again, cutting from the inside makes it much easier to cut. Okay, we're making cheddar ale. Cheddar ale has peppers in it, has onions in it, garlic, cream cheese, flour, butter, cheese, thyme, hot sauce. Okay, so for this recipe, should be it on the prepping, cutting, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so next what we're going to do, we're going to put our stove over. Give it a light, let that pan warm up. Okay, altogether you're going to need 4 tablespoons of butter. Okay, so to start, we just want a tablespoon to start. Okay, most of the butter you buy at the store is going to be labeled, so you don't need to Really pay attention to how where you cut the butter. It should be labeled completely. Okay, so we're gonna let that melt. All right, while we're waiting, we're gonna get our garlic measured out. I'm using that jarred garlic still. The recipe will call for 2 cloves. It's about 2 teaspoons, roughly. If you go to a tablespoon, that's fine too. It's all up to you on your flavor. But roughly 2 tablespoons, teaspoons, tablespoon, teaspoons. You want 2 teaspoons. You can do as much as a tablespoon. Butter is melting, sizzling. Okay, most of it's gone. We got our peppers, onions, and garlic. Into the pan. And should be about medium heat. Medium to medium high is where you want it. Okay. What we're going to do is cook this till the onions get transparent. Once they get transparent, we are going to add the rest of our butter and our flour. This is going to make a roux. And that's going to thicken our soup. This usually is about 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, the batch we're making, it's about enough for 4 or 5 people, depending on how much soup you personally want. But yeah. On stirring, I'm using the spatula. If you want to use a wooden spoon, that'll work too. Whisk, in this recipe, it's ideal to use a whisk, but you don't really want to, because everything will get clogged in it, and we don't want that. It just makes it more of a burden. You should be smelling enough onions and peppers and garlic cooking. Should not smell burnt or burning. Okay, add the rest of our butter. I'm gonna get that melted. Okay, if you want to cut it up smaller so it melts faster, you can. You don't have to. But you do want it all melted first before you add your flour. The recipe will just say add the rest, but trust me, you want to melt it first. And not to plug selflessly, but I did learn this at Free State Brewery. Free State is known for their Cheddar Ale soup. Many people go there just for that. So, in honor of them, sprinkle in flour. In honor of them, I'm making this batch with Free State beer. I will be using their IPA. Different beers will change the flavor depending on how strong a beer flavor it is. IPAs generally have a stronger flavor than, say, your domestics. Not to get too much into beer, but I did work at a brewery for almost 12 years, so I did learn a little bit about beer. It does affect flavor. So, flour goes in, mixed in with the butter. Okay, about 30 seconds. Then we're going to slowly pour our beer in. Okay, you want to pour slowly so that you actually incorporate everything at the bottom. Okay, we're going to be forming a paste. Okay, make sure you scrape the bottom, scrape the sides, get as much of that mixed in as you can. You should have a very nice porridge mixture at this point. Kind of want to try to avoid any color, so you don't want it to burn. So not too dark, not too brown. Stir, scrape the bottom really good. About 30 seconds. Then we're going to add our cream cheese. If you want to cut this up smaller, you can. I put it in and break it up and just kind of stir it. And we really want to stir this so that it is mixed together well. It's okay to have a couple little chunks of cream cheese still showing, but for the most part you want it to be thick and chunky. Okay. Does everybody see that? Your light. Just keep stirring as it heats up. It'll melt down, trust me. Okay. Once it's completely kind of melted in, you want to add your heavy cream. You want to use heavy cream. You can use milk. The only issue with the milk is that it will not be as thick as you might want it. Okay. So I know this is a quart of cream, so there's 4 cups, but I like to gradually at first slowly pour this cream in. What that does is tempers, so it doesn't immediately bubble and sizzle and then immediately go cold, which is what we don't want. Plus we want to get it nice and mixed in. Okay. And just because you're not to a simmer or boil right away does not mean you need to turn your heat up. You need about medium heat. We're actually going to turn it down here in a little bit to a simmer. So go ahead and pour in another cup. That mixed together. And your last cup. Cream is much thicker, has much more higher fat content, so it does stick to the glass really well. So try and get as much out as you can. So there's 3 cups of cream, and now we're going to stir it all together. Okay. And now at this point, we're just going to stir every now and then. We're not bringing this up to a simmer or a boil. Actually, we're bringing it up to about 160 to 170 degrees. The reason we do this is because that's the point the cheese melts is 160. Okay, so all we want it is to the point of being able to melt our cheese in. Does everybody understand that? And literally once it hits this temperature, we're going to turn off the heat and pull it off. So keep an eye on it. You really don't want to go over 160 on this, so having a thermometer is handy. They sell these everywhere now, these hand thermometers. Some of you might have got one from school. But they sell these everywhere. They're pretty cheap. You can find them for under $10, under $5 actually. So we just want to stir. We want it to up to, we'll get 160. Okay, when we take our temps, make sure we're not touching the bottom of the pot. Should take about 4 or 5 minutes, honestly. I'm already at 140. Make sure when you're stirring you're getting the corners, getting the sides. Okay, we don't want anything to burn. Stick to the bottom. Okay, and actually the more you stir, the quicker it'll heat up. We're at 155, so give it a 5 count. 3, 4, 5. Kill the heat. Keep stirring a little bit because residual heat from the stove, unless you pull it all the way off, we'll continue to heat this up and cook it. Okay. Next, we'll do our cheese. Generally, I would say use a white cheddar. I'm not saying you have to go out and buy white cheddar cheese, but generally a white cheddar keeps the color well. Regular cheddar cheese is fine. It'll just turn a little orange, which is okay. I'm going to use a blend myself. So you can use whatever kind of cheese you want. Usually you want a sharper, flavorful cheese because it's going to add flavor to your soup itself. So it wants about 6 ounces. So about 3/4 of a cup. If you go over that, if you do a full cup, that's fine too. It's okay if it's extra cheesy. Okay, so there's a 1/2 cup. We're gonna add this in not all at once, so if you do measure out a cup, put it in about 1/3 to 1/2, stir so it melts. My wife and daughter love cheese, so I'm gonna do a full cup. If you want to measure it out, you can on weight. That's okay too. Generally, if you buy cheese at the store pre-shredded, it's usually weighed out for you, so you could just look at the weight and do it that way too. But your cheese should melt. It shouldn't be chunky. Okay. And at this point, we're going to add our seasonings. Okay, and the longer you let these seasonings sit, the better it'll taste. I'm using Red's hot sauce. It does call for hot sauce. It shouldn't go crazy or take over the flavor. So if it does, that means you put too much in. Just doing a teaspoon. Okay. We're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of white pepper. This is generally white pepper. I'm using black pepper. White pepper has a little bit of flavor. I just didn't buy any at the time. So it's okay if you use white pepper or black pepper. Recipe usually calls for white pepper, but that's okay. You'll just have a couple black spots. Which isn't that big a deal. Thyme. Preferably fresh thyme. If you don't have fresh thyme, it's okay to use the dry thyme. Just cut the amount in half. And I believe it calls To taste, so I'm going to put in 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground thyme, and then on the recipe it'll call for parsley, and this is when you would add the parsley as well. Just stir this in. If you let this sit for a bit, flavors will meld better, it'll taste a little better. If you let it sit overnight and reheat it, it'll taste even better than fresh. Most dishes, if you let them meld, the flavors meld together, it will taste a lot better than if you were to eat it right away. That's why stuff generally tastes better the next day. Pastas, pizzas, when you have them the next day, they always taste a little bit better. That's because flavors have had time to meld. Things have soaked up other flavors. Individual flavors have broken apart and you can taste them. But to serve it, I'm going to use a small bowl just because I'm going to let it sit for a little while, but I do want to show you service. Use the ladle. Okay. Give it a couple stirs with the ladle. You want to get some peppers in there. Okay. Just like that. For a garnish, you could put the parsley on top. You could also put more cheese. Okay. Suggestions for serving. What can you eat this with? You can eat this with any sandwich for the most part. You can eat it by itself. You can eat it dipping bread. If you really want to, you can make yourself some tomato soup. Do half tomato soup and half cheddar ale. Is a really good flavor. They complement each other really well. But there you go, cheddar ale soup.